So what does terror do to those of us left behind, even those who haven't been physically hurt? Have you found yourself not perhaps taking the tube in recent days or looking around you with slightly more suspicion? Joining us now to discuss, if you like, the psychology of fear is Neil Norman, founder of Human Recognition Systems, and Deborah Delvecchio-Scully, the trauma counsellor who was with survivors after 9/11. Thank you both very much for joining us. I wonder, Deborah, if you can give us a sense after an attack like 9/11. We always feel, don't we, that life is never going to be the same again. But did people actually change their behaviour?
Well, I do feel that people did absolutely feel like life had changed forever. And to some degree, I think people change with that. But it all depends on your circumstance. It depends on your exposure. I think in today's world, with all of the uncertainty that's happening in Europe, in Brussels, in Paris, that there is more of a pervasive sense of fearfulness in life in general and how we go about living.
But does that actually last? I mean, if you make a pledge to yourself, like you're not going to get on the subway, you're not going to get on the tube, or whatever it may be, do people stick to that? And if so, for how long?
And that's hard to predict. Those kinds of behaviors are fear-driven, and should things calm down and resume to a more normal, is an overused word, but a sense of less impending doom from the number of attacks that have been happening, people might slowly resume their normal activities. A lot of that depends on who they were before this attack, if they've had exposure to other very scary, terrifying events. I think just the human capacity for coping.
I mean, sometimes we look, Neil, don't we, to technology to give us, if you like, an extra front line in dealing with that terror. Do you think people are weirdly sort of craving that now, craving something that does provide an extra barrier or an extra security?
Well, I think we're accepting of the fact that technology's got a role to play. And I think we also would accept that we're going to have to surrender convenience, something that we crave a lot in the West. So if you look at, for example, what's recently happened, I think it's fair to say one of the things that's going to have to be considered is pushing back the barriers. You know, at the moment we only really stop and check people at the ticket presentation point, whereas if you go through other airports around the world, like in East Africa, for example, they tend to push the barrier out further. And I think
where would you stand on something like profiling? Do you think that is always to be rejected or always to be used?
No, not at all. I think you know, it's a difficult subject, but ICAO, which is one of the bodies within the United Nations, has been looking at this for a number of years now, and has been encouraging airports to introduce some kind of profiling where you have different gradings of security being applied to different threats, with a degree of randomization, you know, so you still, people you assume to be safe, you still randomly select them for different grades of security you're going to put them through. But I think, you know, if you look at the profile of individuals who tend to commit these sorts of terrorist acts, they do fit a particular profile. It's not comfortable for us to discuss, perhaps, but I think there are ways and means. And as I say, ICAO, a United Nations body, has been looking to research and investigate this further.
But there is a guilt associated with profiling, isn't there?
I think there is.
Or a discomfort, I should say, not a guilt.
I think there is, but I also think
I absolutely feel that there's an ethical, it's a slippery slope, ethically, to begin profiling.
And Deborah, what do you think about the formula for dealing with atrocities? I mean, we've noticed here that, you know, there is almost a sense that you have the hashtag ready, or the colours of the Eiffel Tower, or, you know, the sort of changing of the avatar on social media. There's almost a passivity to that response. I wonder if you think that that's a coping mechanism or a way of slipping into acceptance.
Well, unfortunately, I think there is a desensitization. There seems to be so many violent acts, senseless violence acts, senseless terroristic acts, that in essence, I think as a way of coping, particularly with people who have been traumatized, you do slip into avoidance and denial. And unfortunately, I think technology has really shrunk our worlds. So I'm here in Connecticut on the other side of the world, and we counselors with the American Counseling Association, we can anticipate how others are going to respond to something, because social media brings it right into our homes and in such real time.
Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you for joining us.